Hi, welcome back to Reading Queen, my fellow bookworms. Today, we're going to be reading The Hiddenseek. Come out, wherever you are. Chapters 31 through 33. And before we get started, are you Team Luna Lovegood or Team Ginny Weasley? Take a moment to guess what I am. If you guessed Ginny Weasley, you are incorrect, because my favorite is Luna Lovegood. I wonder what team you're on. They're both amazing characters though, so. Alright, anyways, let's get started. Chapter 31. Holly was outside. She was in a courtyard behind the manor. A large, perfectly manicured green lawn stretched before her. She saw a series of square garden beds blooming with red and yellow flowers, and two perfectly symmetrical rectangular hedges facing each other. Between the hedges, in the center of the yard, was a large circular fountain. The woman in black stood next to her. Holly's instinct was to run, to escape, to get as far from her as possible. But the woman in black hadn't moved. Wind blew her hair back, and her black dress flapped in the breeze, clinging to her legs. She slowly turned to Holly. Her eyes were no longer red, they were brown. "You're not him," she said. Then she looked away from Holly, dismissing her. All the woman's attention was on the fountain. Two children were there. Both were dressed in old-fashioned clothes. One had brown hair, the other had blonde and bright blue eyes. It was Edmund. Holly looked at it, who was transfixed by the scene before them. Holly realized that, just as she had seen her own past with Marco and Max and Hector, she was now seeing the witch's past. "The Hiddenseek." Edmund pulled at the other boy's white shirt. You promised to play with me." Yes, fine," the other boy said. He did not sound very enthusiastic about it. "Can we ask the Smith's children to join us? Or James?" Edmund asked eagerly. "It's so much more fun with others." "Later," the other boy said tersely. Edmund began to protest, but the other boy stopped him. "I promise I will find others to join us. You go hide first." "You have to count," Edmund said. The other boy rolled his eyes. 1, 2... Edmund jumped with excitement. He ran off, out of the courtyard and into the woods beyond. The other boy stopped counting as he watched Edmund go. Then he walked to the house, opened the back door, and went inside. At a nearby window, Holly saw a figure peering out. A woman with raven black hair. She was the witch, a past version of her. But she was different. Her hair was curled and braided. Her dress was white and embroidered with flowers. Something shiny glittered at her neck. Suddenly, the fog rushed in again. It didn't creep and surround them like before, but instead washed over them, giving no chance for escape. It flowed over the fountain, over Holly, over everything. When it cleared, Holly was no longer outside. She was near the back. She was inside a dark and moist cave. There was a shallow pool of water near the back. The woman in black was again beside her. The past version of Edmund entered the grotto. He checked behind him to see if he was being followed, then tiptoed over to the pool of water. A few feet above it, on the wall of the cave, was a small alcove, a perfect hiding spot. Edmund sat at the edge of the pool. He whistled absent-mindedly, and as he removed his shoes, he was a languid, melancholy tune, the same one Holly realized she had heard it in the graveyard, that song that had lured it away. With bare feet, Edmund waded in, sloshing through the water. He got to the other side, just below the alcove, and reached up, grasping the rocky surface of the cave wall. He climbed, his feet dripping, making tiny splashes in water below. He brought a knee up, trying to find a nook to rest his foot. The rocks, though, were smooth and slippery. His feet couldn't find purchase, couldn't hold. Then he was dangling. His arms clung to a small, shallow grove in the wall, but they did slide to his knuckles, down to his fingertips, and then to nothing. Edmund fell. His head hit the bottom of the shallow pool. His face dipped in the water. He didn't move. The woman in black rushed to him and fell to her knees. She tried to lift him, but her hands passed right through him. He was nothing but a ghost, a figment, a memory. She couldn't help him or hold him. She couldn't even touch him. She could only watch it all unfold, powerless to change what had happened. The witch huddled over Edmund's lifeless body. Holly didn't dare disturb her, and they stayed like that, alone together inside the woman's grief until a frantic shout broke the silence. "Edmund!" A voice called from behind, a woman's voice. "Which way, Oliver? Where is he?" "Check in here," came the answer. "He sometimes hides in here." The woman in white and brown and the brown-haired boy entered the grotto. She stopped short at the cave, opening her eyes, adjusted to the dark, and she saw the figure of Edmund lying in the pool. Her scream shattered the air. She ran to Edmund. She got on her knees and lifted his head onto her lap. She sat almost in the exact same spot as the woman in black. Their two figures overlapped, ghostly mirrors of each other. "Edmund," the brown-haired boy said. He sounded terrified. The woman in white screamed until she ran out of breath. What had begun as a shriek became a desperate, yearning wail, until finally collapsing and dying as an empty, whispering moan. It was the sound of the woman's heart escaping her body, breaking in two. Her body slumped, drained of all strength. She swayed as if she were sleepwalking or in a trance. She cradled Edmund in her arms, trembling. And then she stopped. A calm passed over her. Slowly she brought her head up. She sat upright, her posture unnaturally, painfully stiff. She stayed in that position, motionless, never taking a single breath, until at last she spoke. "It's not too late." She was suddenly filled with frantic energy and purpose. She leaned across Edmund's body, casting her hands about on the ground, patting, scratching, searching. "I need something sharp," she whispered. The brown-haired boy stepped toward the woman. "Mother," he said, his voice fragile and desperate. She spun to face him. Her eyes were bloodshot from tears. She hissed her response in a dry rasp, as if her throat were on fire. "It's not too late." Her hand went to her chest, where a silver pendant hung below her neck. It was the shape of a raven in fight. Its arched, open wings ended in points as sharp as knives. She grasped the raven and pulled, snapping the thin chain. She opened her palm. With the other hand she sliced, swiftly drawing the raven's silver wings across the tender skin below her fingers. A thin, bright red line formed, then flowed, and moments later her hand was covered in blood. She smeared the blood on her fingers and began tracing symbols on the rocky ground. Then she started to mutter, rhythmically, like a chant, coughing and snarling in a strange tongue. Her head snapped back. Something like smoke, like fog, came from her mouth. It curled, drifting from her to Edmund. The fog took him up, cradled him. He breathed in. Edmund's eyes popped up. They were gray. He cocked his neck and screamed. Dark fog poured from his mouth. It gathered and swirled around him. It surrounded the brown-haired boy. It pummeled the woman in white. It seeped into her skin, her clothes, her white dress turned black. She covered her face with her hands. She screamed again, this time in terror. Fog shot from her eyes, like steam spewing from a kettle. It spilled from her, filling the cave and beyond, leaving dark, empty holes where her eyes once were. Holes that slowly began to turn red. Then the woman wavered, like her body was a reflection in the water. The same happened to Edmund and the brown-haired boy. They all became like smoke, like mist that melted away. The memory was ending. The woman in black, whose past they had just witnessed, was still there, on her knees. She turned around, facing Holly. "You're not him," she said. They were surrounded by thick fog now. Holly could no longer see the walls of the grotto, or the entrance. Nearby, a hole in the fog opened. The woman took no notice. Holly didn't hesitate. She ran, leaving the witch and all her haunted memories behind. Wasn't as evil as she seemed. Well, wasn't. Maybe she is now, or maybe she's just confused, or who knows. Chapter 32. "Where's Holly?" Hector asked, as he followed Edmund farther into the woods. They had rushed out of the manor, passing through a courtyard, past a fountain. "Isn't that the way home?" Hector had asked, but Edmund told him that they had to keep going, that Holly was in trouble. "Just a bit farther," Edmund said. Hector guessed Holly must have found a way out of the house. He hoped so. He couldn't believe how stupid he was for arguing with her before, for saying those things, like any of that mattered right now. "When I find her," Hector promised himself, "the first thing I'm going to say is I'm sorry." The woods thickened, the branches hanging overhead like knobby, crooked fingers. Hector heard the sound of running water. They came across a creek, its shallow water trickling over a bed of rocks. They followed the creek until it brought them to a cave. "In here," Edmund said to Hector. Drips of water echoed from inside. They entered. The stream they had followed ended in a pool of water. Edmund pointed above the pool. There was a crevice there, like a little shelf, a hiding place. "There," Edmund said. "Holly's back there." Hector craned his neck. It didn't look like Holly was back there. "Where?" "You can't see," Edmund said. "It's dark, but she hid in there. I think she might be hurt." "Okay," Hector said. "How do I get up there?" "Take your shoes off," Edmund said. "Climb." Hector sat on the rocks and started pulling off his shoes. "And you'll show us the way home after I get her?" "Of course," Edmund smiled. We can do whatever you want after." Hector waded into the water. It was cold, and pebbles poked at his feet from the silty bottom. He got to the wall below the hiding spot and put his hands on the rock. It was wet and slippery. "Go ahead," Edmund said. "Climb." Hector reached and grabbed a rock jutting out from the wall. He pulled himself up but slipped back down. This would be tricky. He stretched his arm and found another notch to hold on to. He lifted himself, finding a foothold on a little rock ledge. He made sure his hands were secure, then lifted a leg, placing his bare foot on a wide piece of slick stone. He put his weight on that foot and pushed himself higher, feeling along the rock for somewhere to grip. But then his foot slipped. Hector tried to hold on, but there was nothing to grab onto. He fell. His body hit the water below with a splash, and everything went black. Edmund, why? Maybe he wants Hector to be with him forever. So he's trying to make him die the same way that he died all those years ago. Or kinda did. Okay, chapter 33. Holly was back in the bedroom. As soon as she stepped from the fog, it retreated out the window, as if it was being inhaled by something outside. In moments, there was no trace of any mist, inside or out. Sunlight now peeked through the windows, glinting on the broken glass. Holly's thoughts reeled from all she had just seen. The woman in white was the witch. Edmund was her son. He died playing hide and seek. She tried to bring him back. It went horribly wrong. Edmund's parting words shot through her. He is going to be just like me. That's what he had said about Hector before locking her in the bedroom. The doorknob rattled. There was a click. The door opened. A familiar face stepped into the room. A man with a wild mane of unkempt brown hair and a thick, bristly mustache obscuring his lips. He slumped like an invisible weight hung from his neck. Oliver. You, he scowled at Holly. Then he noticed the broken window and the secret passage, still open in the wall. What happened in here? Where is Edmund? That's what I was going to ask you, Oliver, Holly said. Or should I say, little Oliver. He loomed over Holly. It reminded her too much of the way he had come for her when they first met. What did you say? He demanded. What did you call me? Little Oliver, she said. That's what your mother called you, isn't it? It was a hunch she had from the letters she'd read and the memories she'd just seen. The witch's husband, Oliver, had in fact died. This Oliver was the brown-haired boy from the memories, the older son, named after his father. Somehow he had aged, even though Edmund and the witch hadn't, but he was the same boy. He had to be. How do you know that? He looked confused and angry, and there was something else. Holly thought she saw across his face. Shame. She's your mother, Holly said. Yours and Edmund's, isn't she? Oliver didn't answer. He deflated. His body sagged. He went to the edge of the bed and sat, hunching over, his elbows resting on his knees. Yes, he said. Edmund is my brother. For a moment, Holly almost felt bad for him. What happened? She asked. What is this place? Why did you bring me here? Why? Oliver laughed bitterly. Because it's my fault she was lost, and I have never stopped paying the price. He rose, walking over to the broken pitcher on the floor. He knelt. My mother tried to bring him back, he said. She failed, so we were trapped in time, like in a memory, Edmund's last memory. He shook his head and gave a small, sad smile. In his favorite game, the Hiddenseek. But why take us? Holly needed to know. She had to know why she had older brothers she couldn't remember, why she'd probably never see her parents again, why her entire life had been turned inside out. Because I told Edmund I would play with him. It's what he remembered. So here we are. I'm cursed to fulfill my last promise to him. Over and over, forever. You have to find others to play, Holly whispered. He nodded. Edmund doesn't age. I grow older, but only when I enter your world, those few brief minutes each time. Oliver rubbed his finger on the floor. He held it up for Holly to see. It was dipped in blood from when Holly had thrown the pitcher at the witch. Tell me, he said. How do you know all of this? What happened in here? I was pulled into the fog, Holly motioned toward the window. With your mother. Oliver looked grim. Help me find my brother, she pleaded, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Please, you have to help me. No, Oliver said. I don't. He is your concern, not mine. Oliver turned as if to go. But Hector is with Edmund, she called to him. Oliver stopped. At last he met Holly's gaze. They looked surprised. Edmund said he was going to make Hector just like him, Holly explained. What does that mean? Oliver looked alarmed at first. He wouldn't, he said, but then he quickly shook his head, banishing whatever thought he had. He just wants someone who will play with him. No, Holly grabbed his arm, trying to force him to react to care. Don't you get it? Edmund doesn't really want Hector. He wants someone who will always be there to play with him. He wants a brother. He wants you. Oliver shook his head. It's not me he wants. He turned his back on Holly. He wants what I should have been. Please, go save your brother if you can. He walked to the window and stared out of it. There's no saving mine. Holly backed out the door, leaving. There was no use. He wasn't going to help. She raced down the stairs. The house was quiet, but she couldn't make out the faint trill of bird songs and leaves whispering in the wind. The subtle sounds of the outdoors. A door was open somewhere. She found it just around the other side of the staircase. It led to the courtyard. It was like stepping into ancient ruins. Holly had seen the same courtyard in the witch's memory, tidy and neatly trimmed. Now wild grass and weeds overran the garden beds. The hedges were overgrown. At the center of the yard was the fountain. A girl with rainbow hair sat on the edge. Petunia! Holly ran to her. Petunia looked. Her face lit up. She leapt off the fountain and grabbed Holly in a fierce hug. Holly, she gasped. You're all right. Where's George? Holly asked. Have you seen Hector? George didn't make it. Petunia looked back to the warehouse, frowning. He saved me. Holly bit her lip. She swallowed an ache at the back of her throat. What more could possibly happen? How much more would this terrible place take? I saw Oliver, Petunia said. She thumbed toward the fountain. He said Edmund was right. This really is the way home. It's home base, you could say. Holly peered inside the fountain. It was filled with swirling fog instead of water. Why are you still here then? Holly asked. You could have left. Petunia shook her head. No, I couldn't. She punched Holly lightly on the arm. Not without my friends. Despite everything, a smile broke across Holly's face. She hadn't known how much she needed to hear those words, not until Petunia had said them. Friends, Holly said. I could really use one of those. A pale hand emerged from the fog and grasped the edge of the fountain. Petunia, Holly whispered, taking a step back. Petunia, move! But it was too late. A head rose from the mist, an ivory face with hair as black as midnight, with eyes red like a dying sun. It pulled herself up, as if climbing from the depths of the earth. She placed a hand on the back of Petunia's head. Petunia had just enough time to look surprised before turning into stone. The woman in black tumbled out of the fountain, falling to the grass. She moaned. She clawed at the ground. She grasped handfuls of dirt. She crawled toward Holly. Holly wanted to scream in shock and pain and rage, but the sound died in her throat. There was no point. It was never going to give up. The witch would keep coming for her. She would never stop. Why? Holly managed to croak. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? You're not him. That was what the woman had said to Holly when they were in the memory. It's not what she wants, Holly realized. It was Edmund. It's not us she wants, Holly realized. It was Edmund. It wanted Edmund. And suddenly, Holly knew what she had to do. I accidentally ripped the book. It's fine. Anyways, I hope you liked today's video. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications, maybe, and share your friends for more awesome videos like this. Bye!